Hello, everyone. My name is Ana Moreno, and I am from the Chico Xavier Spiritist Center based in Portland, Oregon. Today, I'm going to be the host, studying with you lesson number 29, which is about chapter 30. As we continue this study, today we'll be talking about Spiritism and its practices. And I know that you guys have already studied a lot. And now we go back a little bit thinking, what is Spiritism? And for those who do not know, there is a book, a very simple book that was written by Allan Kardec more than 150 years ago, explaining exactly what Spiritism is. So it's a way to see, like, if you are in a hurry, if you're not ready to go through all the 5 books from the codification, you can see this little tiny pocket book that you can find on Amazon.com and other sites as well. It is available in English and also in Portuguese. And that's a very good way to get, in a nutshell, in a very, expedited way, a lot of good information about Spiritism. But today, we're going to be talking about the 3 pillars of Spiritism, but we start with this basic question. What is Spiritism? Well, Spiritism, according to Allan Kardec, is a philosophical doctrine with a scientific basis with moral consequences, showing us, each one of us, that everything is linked. While Spiritism basically help us understand, the basic questions of life, it also gives us this connection with the superior, with the spiritual realm, helping us understand. Okay, so what happens um, after life? Where do I come from? Why I am here? So, as I mentioned in the previous slide, there are 3 pillars, 3 basically foundational pillars on Spiritism. The first one that we're going to be looking at is basically the scientific pillar. Then we have the philosophical pillar. And the third, but not less important, the religious one. So this triple aspect of Spiritism basically gives us a pretty deep foundation, kind of showing us proof points with the scientific aspect that Allan Kardec, based on his experiments with mediumship, was able to prove the the reality of the spiritual realm. We have the philosophical aspect, as we're gonna talk more about it, that basically covers all those life and death questions that many of us have since small. So, what is God? Where do we come from? And etc. And the third one, as I said, it's the number 3 here, but nonetheless is not less important than the others, is the moral aspect. And that morality really comes from the connection with all the teachings that we have received from Jesus more than 2,000 years ago. So the scientific aspect of Spiritism is a little bit different than what we have seen so far as we go to school, as we go to universities. The science that we have learned since we were little is the science that basically manages the universe that we see, that we touch, that we interface here while in matter. The scientific aspect of Spiritism is a little bit different. Why? Because it studies the spirits, their origin, nature, state, and purpose, their environment, meaning the spiritual world, and their relations with the material world. Well, we know that our world is not composed by matter, the matter that we can touch and see with our bare eyes. We know about electricity, we know about radio waves, we know about Wi-Fi and why some people are able to connect to a Wi-Fi network, others cannot. And nowadays, we can talk to friends who live overseas. We can see their faces, like what we're doing right now. And all these facts prove that what my parents thought as fiction, like books, his stories from books, are reality, right? So we have learned at school, we have, even if we don't understand this technology, we know that it exists because we can feel it, we can use it every day. Even a baby that has no idea about Apple or Steve Jobs can manipulate an iPad much better than many adults. So scientific progress is a reality that we have learned at school, is a reality that we use it every day. So the spiritual science, as Spiritism teaches, is complementary to the science that we learn at school. And it studies the spirits and the realm, where they live, how they live, and how they relate with us, showing us that there's no separate spaces among the material realm and the spiritual realm, which is something very important for us to understand, because some of us may think that, okay, I don't want to believe it, this doesn't exist. That doesn't make any difference. The fact that I don't want to see, the fact that I say that I don't believe, don't make something disappear. And that's what Allan Kardec has been showing us on these books. We know that many people would say, well, this is, that's not reality. This is true, not true. But I would say, how much information, how much hours of study or careful study, experiments, these people who may say that, the spiritual reality does not exist, have really spent. Because how can I, for example, be able to criticize or comment on a piece of art, if I have never been to art school, if I have never studied art in my life, if I have never read an art book in my life? So if we want to understand something, if we want to make comments about something, if we want to criticize something, the first thing to do is to study. Remembering that Allan Kardec himself started to study the spirits and what was going on with the turning tables and the talking tables, because he didn't believe. He himself didn't believe. He was an academic professor. For him, this was, like a magnetic force. But then how can a table respond to questions? How can you interact and have a dialogue with a table? So he understood there was, some type of intelligence behind that table, because a table is something that is dead. It's not an organic being, right? So it's important for us to understand this experimental method that Kardec used, that actually it was something that was created by Francis Bacon, and Francis Bacon is from the 16th century. So the way that it works with this experimental method is that Kardec started from the facts, from things that could not be explained by those scientific laws from the 19th century. So how do you explain that a table can fly? How can you explain that a table can answer questions, that can carry on a conversation? And he was a great observer. So besides being an academic person, very knowledgeable person, we know that he had published several books. He had been to one of the best schools in Switzerland. He started to observe the phenomena. And based on that, he wrote 5 books that are the foundation or the codification of Spiritism. And interesting enough is that these 5 books were not psychographed. So that means that Allan Kardec himself, he came as an observer, but he didn't have mediumship that, could write or could see spirits, for example. But the way that he organized these books, it formed like a compilation. These 5 books are the compilation, are basically the summary of what the Spiritism is. As I said, he used the experimental method created by Francis Bacon, where he observed, he compared, he analyzed, he went back into, from the fact, from the cause, and he came with laws by observing, showing that all those facts were based on a cause, therefore consequences of something that we didn't know by then. And through the mediumship experimentation, he basically investigated on what we know now from the modern science coming from Richer's metaphysics. And we know that this is reality in many of the universities today, such as Stanford, such as Harvard, where they study paranormal sciences, such as parapsychology, psychotronics, psychobiophysics, among others. So we understand that there is something different that what we know based on the facts, based on what he was perceiving, based on what he was seeing, right? And then he was kind of going back to build the theory, which is different than what we know, that many times what the doctors do today is that they come from a theory to explain some results. In this case, no. It was the opposite direction. So we're going to be talking about these 3 pillars, and I'm going to start with the scientific aspect, which is based on 2 books. Mostly the medium's book, which if you feel that you have mediumship, if you feel that it is time to basically explore and develop this talent, because we know that we are all mediums. We have mediumship. I can deny it. I may avoid it, but each one of us have. And that mediumship may come through intuition. That mediumship may come from ideas that we have in our dreams. It may come from sensations that we have, like, something's good and gonna happen, or something bad's gonna happen, or feelings when we approach people, like, I need to be cautious, or no, this person is a friend. This is all mediumship. So it's me, the higher being on me, basically knowing more than this person, just Anna. So the scientific aspect can be found most on the medium's book. And this is basically a book to be studied by mediums over and over again. It is very interesting, as it gives pretty deep information, understanding that it wasn't something that Kardec wrote himself. It was information that came from spirits that are basically compiled on that book. And the other book that also have information about this scientific experience is Genesis, which is different from the Old Testament. It's something that is part of the codification that was done by Allan Kardec. So the philosophical aspect, as I said before, unlike the scientific aspect, basically looks at the basically fundamental principles, and this can be found in the Spirit's book. It helps us understand the spiritual world, the world that we cannot see with our material eyes. It is a book. It's the first book of the codification, probably the most important one, and it's a book of questions and answers. And one of the first questions that he poses is about God. And he doesn't ask who is God. He asks, what is God? Understanding that it would be a wrong assumption from him, Kardec, asking the spirits, that God would be a being just like us. So the Spirit's book is a book to be studied, is a book that should be by our nightstand, because we learn something new every time we go through it. We have about 1,000 questions that were asked by Allan Kardec and answered by the spirits, not by one spirit, but the way that he combined the information was sending these questions to different spirit centers in different locations, and basically collecting those answers and answering. And to his surprise, the answers were the same. So the Spirit's book unveils very important questions that we have. So mysteries of life that since kids we may have asked our parents. So where do I come from? Where I'm going after I die? Will I meet you after you die? But besides these basic questions, it talks about the moral laws, which is very important too. Understanding that these moral laws are the divine laws, the laws that basically manage the whole universe, or the universes actually. And these laws are the same for us as beings, living beings, as well as the universe. So if you are curious to understand more about Spiritism, this is the place to start, because you're going to see, who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? Why do I suffer so much? Where do we go after we die? Does everything end? What is God? So these detailed principles that he shares with us, with the origin of everything and the universe, and answering profound questions, is very enlightening. And for us who are curious, that one that has that thirst of knowing more, this is a wonderful place to learn. Then the third aspect is the religious aspect. And as I mentioned before, is not less important than the other ones. Because in the religious aspect, this third pillar of the Spiritist doctrine, we can learn the moral values. They are all based on Jesus' teachings. And we can see the way that the Spiritist doctrine is organized. So the first thing that makes us reflect is that with such turmoil that we live today in terms of questions of what's wrong, what is right and what is wrong, the differences and the battles that we have seen around the globe, not only here in the United States, but among other countries, this is happening because these moral values have not been embedded in all of us as living beings. The suffering that we see outside is a consequence of the bad choices that we have done internally, that all the evil that still resides within ourselves. And what we learn in this third pillar, so important pillar, is that without changing ourselves, without becoming better people, we cannot have a better world. Suffering will only end when we learn to love one another. The other thing is that many people may think, okay, Spiritism is, this woo-woo thing. They talk to spirits. This is not in the Bible. Actually, Jesus saw the spirits, talked to the spirits. We saw also the apostles on Pentecostes talking in languages that they couldn't understand. They couldn't speak. We saw them curing ill people, blind people. So what we want to see is, with this third pillar, is going back to Jesus' teachings. This back to the basis, remembering, studying again everything that he left back to us. Probably the most important one is love one another. We are all equal. We are all brothers and sisters. God is our Father. The only prayer that he has left us starts with our Father. So saying our Father shows that we are all siblings. So as siblings, how should we treat each other? Well, we should treat each other just like Jesus treated all of us. Good people, bad people, people who are doing wrongdoings. Understanding that each one of us has its own limits, understanding and using compassion on everything that we do. The third aspect of this religious pillar that is very important is that, unlike the Catholic Church or the Lutheran Church or other religions that we know, there is no hierarchy. You will not find like a pope like in Spiritism, because we see each other. Doesn't matter what is our role in the Spirit Center. Our role is always as a servant of Jesus, as a worker, as someone who needs to help others. But Anna, does it mean that anyone can do anything on Spiritism because there is no hierarchy? No. So the idea is that we follow these 5 books. After the codification, if you want to learn more, there are several books from Chico Xavier. There are several books that were written by Divaldo Franco. And all these 1,000 books combined, they will provide us with a wealth of knowledge that we can apply in our everyday life. Without him concluding that we as humans survived after that, because he was talking to spirits that were giving names, dates, addresses, we know that there is a relationship among all of us and God. And every time that we connect with God, we can call it a religion. So we can say that Spiritism is a religion in that sense. So as I wrote here, Spiritism is a spiritual religion without formalities, dogmas of faith, rituals, sacraments, and organized priesthood usually found in other religions. And if we go back to the New Testament, we're going to see on John chapter 4, verse 24, God's Spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. And that's what we try to do. The idea is to worship not during the time that we are in the Spirit Center, but embedding that behavior in our everyday lives. Doesn't matter if we are at home, if we are at work, if we are on the street. The idea is to apply those teachings into our everyday life. So as we continue to look at Spiritism and the religious pillar, all the conclusions were based on proof. What do you mean proof, Anna? What I mean by proof is based on all the messages that were psychographed for those thousands of mediums at that time in France, but in other countries as well, showing that there is life after death. As I mentioned to you, in those books, we will find names, addresses, dates, everything. The other thing is this connection among all beings. All beings. So I'm not only saying human beings, I'm talking about living beings. So that the importance of us to not only respect each other as humans, but respect nature, respect animals. And then that shows a lot the meaning of life, the way that we should live our everyday life, just like Jesus did, just kind of a living by his example. And we may question many times, and I would say that for those who have been reading the New Testament and the Old Testament, know that the language is a very difficult language to read, to understand. And one of the things that I love the most about Spiritism is that it unveils all these teachings. So if we see, the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is one of the books that Allan Kardec wrote, and this is the book where you can find the moral aspect of the Spiritist doctrine. That is where you can find the guideline on how to live well, how to be a good person. How do we know if we're going in the right or wrong direction? We can find that information over there. Why? Because in the Gospel according to Spiritism, Kardec unveils all Jesus' allegorical language, a language that was used so the people from that era could understand what he was saying. If we go back 2,000 years ago, we will remember that people that Jesus was preaching to, was working with, were people that couldn't read, couldn't write, were poor, were slaves, were treated like nothing in the society. So he had to use a language that could be understood by all of them, right? Also, it complements, if you go back to the Gospel according to Spiritism, it complements, it adds new teachings. That's the consoler. We learn new things through the spirits that Jesus could not share 2,000 years ago. Why? Because we were not ready. Remembering that we are the ones that through reincarnation were together with Jesus at that time. Doing what? We don't know. Did we accept Jesus? Who would know? But also on the Gospel according to Spiritism, we will also see Allan Kardec, through the spirits, explaining that there are no miracles, that all the strange things that cannot be explained by the science of, our planet here can be explained through the spiritual science. So Jesus' telepathy, the way that he knew where to find fish. The second side, that he understanding what's going to happen in the future, knowing that, for example, Peter was going to deny him 3 times. All the healings that he did, making people walk, or separating the evil spirits from a person. So we need to understand that through his life, during Jesus' life, he was showing this mediumship over and over again. And through the parables, that the stories, the simple stories that he used to explain what was the kingdom of God, and what else, what we should do, we can now understand on a day-to-day basis what it really means to us here. How can we apply? If we follow Jesus, make no mistake, we will be in the right direction. Jesus has been designated by the spirits as the guide and model for humanity. This is in the Spirit's book, question 625. He's the pinnacle. He is the person who's has been more written about in this past 2,000 years. He was such an important character that he basically divided history in before and after Jesus. So as a model, we can look up to him thinking that we should aspire to become like him someday. And that's why he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. Meaning, if you do not learn to live like I lived, we will not be able to be with God. So the three pillars, as we explained, if you are devoted on or interested, curious on experimenting with mediumship, study more, learning more, you want to go to the Spiritist science, which is mostly on the medium's book and Genesis. For those who are trying to find a better understanding about all the mysteries in the universal life, there are wonderful resources on the philosophical aspect of the Spiritism, which you can find on the Spirit's book. But only those who really want to inquire about how they should live well, how can they cease suffering, how can they follow Jesus' steps, what is the real Christian conduct, then they should learn, they should study more and more the gospel according to the Spiritism. And I would say that as we transform ourselves in better people, as we trim our vices, as we are able to make better choices, we improve our quality of life, we improve our happiness and the happiness of those around us. And if I ask any one of you, what do you want? I am sure that a great part will say, I want to be happy. So this is the way that we can offer as spiritists, showing that as we transform ourselves through the inner reform, as we learn more about Jesus through Kardec with different eyes, we will suffer less. As I mentioned, there are many people who look for the Spiritist doctrine because of the mediumship, because they see things at home, or their parents saw things at home, or the kids play with invisible friends. And that's good. I would say we've been in contact with the spiritual world, with the invisible world. And it's important to understand how to deal with it, how to relate with it. But if the mediumship practice provide very valuable help, it is important to know that together we need to study. Because Spiritism is not only the mediumism. It's about studying, it's about working to help others. It's about Christian living. It's about setting up our own evolution. And I can explain that in a very simple way. If I want to become a doctor, I need to go to school. I need to go to medical school. So if I want to have my mediumship in a very equalized, balanced, structured way, I will need to put a lot of discipline and hard work on it. Because if we know that mediumship is a great thing, it's a great asset, it can also be very difficult if we do not know how to work with it. So if you go to an Spiritist center, what will you find? And this is probably something that you've been asking yourself, because as I said, there are a lot of stories about Spiritism that not necessarily are true. But we'll find praying groups, meditation groups, therapeutic passes, which is basically the way that we donate good energy, not only our energy, but energy that comes from the superior spirits to others. We'll find magnetized water. We may find mediumistic practice. And for sure, there will be study groups and lectures. Why? Because there are a lot of people that come to Spiritism because they need help. They need to be consoled. They are suffering. And then listening to Jesus' words soothes our soul, help us a lot. The study groups are important because, on the other hand, as we study, we learn something new and make less mistakes. By making less mistakes, we suffer less. So we need to balance that. We cannot use the Spirit Center as a band-aid. So I only go and I get a healing passy and magnetized water, and then I feel good, and then I disappear again until the next problem. Why? Because if I don't transform myself, I will always face the same challenges. And it's only through this study, the discipline of continuous study, that I will modify my behavior and become a better person. Now, what you will not find in a Spirit Center is any time of exorcism, any time of beings sacrifices, magical rituals, or meetings that will require special clothing like white or black or red. No, we'll not find any image, not any scent. There will be no offerings to spirits, and we know that there are other religions that would offer food or vegetables or flowers. That doesn't happen in Spiritism. There's no rituals. There's no reading the future. Some people come to the Spirit Center and ask, okay, what should I do? I don't know. I don't know what you should do. You need to ask yourself. You need to study and think, okay, what's the best for me? What's the best for the people who are involved in this situation? There are no sacraments like the baptisms or marriages. Nevertheless, we as spiritists, we respect all the other religions. We understand that any religions that can connect us with God is a good place to be. Continuing, if you go to a Spirit Center, you will not find any special meetings, any special prayers. So unlike what we see in some of the other churches, we pray, we continue to pray, but there will never be a praying session that is paid. There's no amulets, there's no magical or miraculous prayer to achieve material benefits or to do not get COVID, for example. Payments of any kind are not acceptable. There's no dances, there's no kind of a possessions or different activities, there's no chants or exotic language, there's no alcoholic beverage, there's no candles, cigars. So you may think that a lot of what you heard may not be exactly what it is over there. So as a Spiritist center, what we learn is we need to live and practice Spiritism as in its essences, doing the good, helping others. That's the basic of Spirit Center. And as Spiritists, continuing that thought, we see that everything we do should be practiced with love. That we should always live to go beyond where we are and try to help others the best we can. And living Spiritism on its basis means bringing it outside the Spirit Center and living according to Jesus' teachings inside our homes, at our work, with everyone that is around us. So to close our conversation today, I invite you to know these 5 books, the codification, to know the 3 pillars better. If you are curious about the universal laws, the Spirit's book. If you want to learn more about mediumship, go to the Medium's book and Genesis. If you want to transform yourself and understand more and more about suffering, why are you suffering? Go to the Gospel according to Spiritism. These are 4 books. Then the 5th book, as I mentioned, there are 5 books on the codification, is Heaven and Hell, which is, there are a lot of dialogues among people who are on the spiritual realm with the mediums here, and they share their stories about how they faced the spiritual realm, what they learned, and everything else. So with that, I wrap up our conversation today, thanking you for being with me during these 40 plus minutes, and let's see if we have any questions. No, that's a good one. So is spiritualism and Spiritism the same thing? No, it's not. It's different. So Spiritism is a different word because it was created by Allan Kardec and is based on these 5 books that he wrote with the help of the spirits. Spiritualism is any religion that basically believes that there is something else besides the material realm. So if you want to study Spiritism, you need to look for Allan Kardec's books. Any other question? Oh, okay. Do I need to pay to receive passes? Are passes and Reiki the same thing? Oh, that's a good question, the second one. So no, in any spirit center, you don't need to pay for anything. Of course, as in a spirit center, we rent a place, we have our costs, we need to pay for the power, for the water, for the rent, and everything else. So we all often ask for people to donate and help to pay with the fixed expenses and the costs to make the door, to let the doors being open. But we will never see someone saying, oh, if you want to get a pass, you need to pay X amount of dollars. No, if you see that, don't go to this place. And the second question is Reiki and the spiritual pass the same thing? Kind of. I studied Reiki as well. So because I wanted to understand how it is, what it is exactly. So we know that in Reiki, we are donating a lot of our energy. So the person who is giving the Reiki energy and actually also has this connection with these higher beings. And in the past is something very similar too. We are basically the channeling this energy from the spiritual beings into someone. But unlike Reiki, that people may pay $50, $100, $150, depending on the person who is giving the Reiki, on a spiritist passive, if you go to a spirit center, you will never have to pay $1. Any other questions? Does the Spiritism explain where I will go after I die? Yes. So this is one of those very profound universal questions that you can find in the Spirit's book. So it will show that, in a nutshell, like just not trying to be a spoiler here, we will find a lot aside exactly what we find here. What I mean by is, if I am a good person, a happy person, I help others, I will find an environment that is warm and appealing and friendly, such as the one that I built here. If I am someone who is always complaining, who is depressed and, fighting with everyone, full of anger and sorrow, I will continue to find that. So it's important for us to rethink the way that we live here today, now, because that's exactly what we will continue to be in the afterlife. So if I'm doing the right things, if I can put my head on the pillow and feel like, okay, I've done my part, everything that I could in the best way, I don't need to worry about that. Isn't that good? Anything else before we wrap up? One more, okay? I read a little about Kardec, and there were turning tables. They were able to communicate with. Why I don't see this anymore? And this is a question that we got asked many times in our center as well, people who come to study. So in the 19th century, there were a lot of mediumship phenomena, basically to call the attention of the people around, of the peoples, because there were different groups in different countries that were basically called out by the reality of a spiritual realm. So that's why we saw so much going on in the 19th century. Right now, we don't need that anymore. What we need is to study. And then we see great mediums in Brazil, such as Divaldo Franco and Chico Xavier, who wrote more than 500 books, where our responsibility right now is to study these books, learn, and become better people. We already know that the spiritual realm is a reality. No questions about that. So it's about transforming ourselves and becoming better people, so we can approach the spiritual realm in a better position that we approached in the past. Anything else? Okay. So with that, I thank you all for staying with me, and I hope to see you in the next lectures, and thank you for joining us. Have a good night.